Welcome to the ATEA Symposium, hosted by Dr. John Conley from Sussex County Community College in New Jersey on the topic of the importance of and current trends in optics technology today. Let me do that one more time. The importance of and current trends in optics technology today. We are so pleased to have our speakers. We have a very strong set of panelists, and we also have people on the call from Alabama, from Washington State, from Illinois, and of course New Jersey, and the preponderance of participants are going to be from New York. We're so pleased that Alex Vogt invited the Monroe Community College students to join, and Dr. Conley will be the moderator throughout. You will have an opportunity to ask questions that you'll be guided in where that opportunity is. So with that, Dr. Conley, thank you so much for hosting this. And I look forward to this very interesting presentation. I want you to know it's recorded and it will eventually be on YouTube.
Sandra, thank you very much. For those of you who do not know who Sandra is the executive director for the ATEA. I am the current president of the ATEA, the American Technical Education Association. The American Technical Education Association promotes those areas in technology that pertain to industry and our economy in manufacturing, distribution, healthcare, logistics. They have been around for some odd 100 years, and they represent the higher education space in this regard. Today, this symposium, its focus will be on optics technology, as Sandra indicated to you. We do have a great speaker to begin for us, keynote. We also have other speakers who serve on a panel for us today. I will be introducing right off the bat, Amy Eskilsson. Amy Eskilsson serves as the current president and chief executive officer for INRAD Optics. She has been doing this since October of 2012. She's been a long and strong advocate for localized manufacturing. Amy is focused on building an organization that is competitive and profitable while delivering products with extraordinary optical specifications. Knowing Amy for several years, I will simply say that what she has done with INRAD Optics is nothing short of a miracle. She has basically been involved right from the very beginning and has done a remarkable job. She is an industry leader in this regard, has served on many panels. Ms. Eskilsson is involved in the photonic startups for Nova Phase, Mento Systems, and Indesta Quantum Electronics. And she currently serves as the director at large for the Optical Society and is a trustee to the New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So Amy, thank you very much for your willingness to serve as the keynote speaker today for our symposium, to lead us right away in a conversation about the optics industry, the challenges and the trajectory. Amy, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Connolly, for that really very nice introduction. And thanks to the American Technical Education Association for the opportunity to speak to you today about optics and photonics. It's a technology area that I've been engaged in for the last 25 plus years. I'll start with a really short little bit about INRAD Optics. We will celebrate our 50th year in 2023, sorry. We possess extensive optical fabrication capabilities, and we utilize these resources to manufacture high precision optical components from glass, crystal, and metal. Our unique expertise includes proprietary crystal assemblies that are used for nanoscale surface analysis, production of extreme precision optical surfaces, and large form optics. All of our R&D, engineering, manufacturing is done here in Northvale, New Jersey, and we have a talented, committed, and diverse workforce of 55 employees. When I was planning this talk, I wanted to understand a bit more about the ATEA and in which technical areas the member schools are focused. On the website, I learned that ATEA will hold its annual conference in April under the title, The Renaissance of Technical Education. My first reaction was, it is about time. And then I saw that the conference's focus is on artificial intelligence in 4 different sectors. And I quickly realized that every topic area that the conference will address relies heavily on optics and photonics to enable it. The digital transformation is simply not possible without optics and photonics. So my hope for today is to shed some light on the optical technologies you may not even realize are at work in our day-to-day life, and to talk to you about the vast array of ways that optics is not just changing our world, but absolutely vastly improving it. So I am going to share my screen at this point. Hang on one sec. Okay. How are we doing? I think you folks can see. Large screen. So first, let's talk about the terms optics and photonics. There are differing schools of thought on what these, how these words are classified in our lexicon. So I consulted Tom Houskin, a senior science advisor at Optica, which is the premier professional society in optics and photonics. And I asked him how their organization defines the terms. He told me that they tend to use the two of them together, specifically because everyone seems to have a different definition. Some in our community thinks photonics is the narrower topic and optics is all encompassing, while others think exactly the opposite. So for our purposes today, I'm going to adopt the same parameters as Optica, and I'll also rely on the National Academy of Sciences report, Optics and Photonics, Essential Technologies for Our Nation, that was published in 2012. And in this report, they basically start out in the first chapter and say, call it what you want, but for this report, we're going to use the two words interchangeably. So I do think it makes sense to start with a bit of history. Way back in the 16th century, English physicist and mathematician Isaac Newton began a series of experiments with sunlight and prisms. He demonstrated that clear white light was actually composed of 7 visible colors. By scientifically establishing our visible spectrum, Newton laid the path for others to experiment with color in a scientific manner. His work led to breakthroughs in optics, physics, chemistry, biology, and this happened over all these breakthroughs happened over the courses of the 17th and 18th century. By 1864, Scottish physicist James Maxwell had developed his electromagnetic theory of light, and he concluded that light behaves as an electromagnetic wave, similar to a radio wave. We now know that visible light is just the middle portion of this wider electromagnetic spectrum that spans gamma waves to radio waves. So in the beginning of the 20th century, as science is progressing, Max Planck and later Albert Einstein proposed that light was a wave as well as a particle, which was a very controversial theory at the time, but experimentation later confirmed this, what we call duality in the nature of light. In 1926, in a letter to the journal Nature, Gilbert Newton Lewis first coined the word photon, which we now know as a particle of light or a light particle. The word photonics appeared around 1960 when Theodore Maiman first demonstrated the laser. So with the demonstration in 1960 of the first working laser, many of the fundamental but seemingly disconnected principles of optics were focused and drawn together. The many lasers that are in use today and under development for the future can be categorized several different ways. You can categorize them by wavelength, meaning color, by delivery method, or by what the amplification or gain medium is. If we look at all these various lasers that we have now, if we look at them categorized by gain medium, we get a good idea of the breadth of technologies and the applications where they're used. The first laser was produced using a ruby crystal as the amplifier or gain medium. Lasers that use a glass or a crystal, like the original ruby laser, are termed solid state lasers. The most common are YAG or yttrium aluminum garnet, and those lasers are used for skin resurfacing, surgical applications, engraving, etching, and other industrial processes. titanium sapphire lasers are the workhorses in scientific research. Solid state lasers are frequently used in LiDAR applications. And you may know that LiDAR is one of the key technologies for autonomous driving or driverless cars. Gas lasers use, obviously, a gas or a gas mixture. And there are three common ones. There's a CO2 laser that's employed worldwide for industrial cutting and welding. The excimer laser that's used in photolithography and LASIK surgery for your eyes. And then there's the helium neon laser, which is a green wavelength laser that has excellent beam quality, is very moderately priced, and is likely found in the labs of each of your science departments, or at least I hope so. Dye-based lasers, an older laser, but still in continued use. They operate using a continuous pump liquid dye system. They're used in scientific, industrial, military, medical applications that include dermatology, cardiology, vascular procedures, angioplasty, urology, and cancer phototherapy. There are more lasers, and this is a different group of lasers. Semiconductor lasers utilize gain mediums made from various configurations of gallium, arsenide, aluminum, indium, and phosphorus. It's a very large group of very small form factor lasers, and they are broadly deployed in telecommunications, data storage, barcode readers, laser printing and scanning, and this just really names a handful of applications. Then we can talk about photonic integrated circuits. Now, these are also known as PICs, and they utilize semiconductor structures where they build the electronics and the optics together on a small silicon chip. Fiber lasers, which have been adopted virtually across all industries, utilize optical fibers that are doped or infused with rare earth elements. A high power fiber laser uses semiconductor laser diode bars coupled with rare earth fiber bundles, and they produce intensely focused, high energy laser cutting power. On the most novel version of lasers currently, quantum cascade lasers. They're fairly new. It's a semiconductor laser, and they utilize a novel quantum or molecular level interactive structure. And those lasers are being adopted for military countermeasures, gas sensing, and they're beginning to be used in the medical diagnostics field. So in addition to lasers, we've got today's optical technologies. They also utilize a variety of other light sources. There are high brightness white light sources, light emitting diodes or LEDs, these built on a chip light sources, and that's just a couple. Specifically, the OLED, which is the organic light emitting diode, is the light source found in our everyday display electronics now. Our phones, tablets, increasingly used for augmented reality and virtual reality headsets. And headsets like this are not just for gaming, but they're for training, other commercial and military applications. So you might be saying, why is she talking about lasers and light sources and not optics? So I'm talking about lasers and light sources for two reasons. One, because the important piece is that information can be transmitted in a light source, as it is in copper or coax cable. This is the basis for all optical communications, that you can embed information in the light. Two, because of all this myriad different sources that we have, they operate at different wavelengths, they produce different powers, and they have different information carrying capabilities. They also have their own continuously expanding set of optical components and subassemblies that are necessary to build products and systems. This is what we call the photonics industry. If you don't have a light source, you don't need an optic. Conversely, once you've got a light source, you likely need more than one optic. You likely need many optical components to achieve the desired result from your light-based system. The concept of a light source is also a good way to differentiate between what I mean when I refer to optics and photonics and other optics like eyeglasses or binoculars. So at this point, it's probably makes sense to kind of zoom out and talk about this optics and photonics big picture. SPIE, which is the International Society for Optics and Photonics, published an industry report in the fall of 2020. In that document, they tell us the following. Just as a basis, the monetary value of all finished goods and services produced worldwide, everything in 2019, what we call the global GDP, amounted to 87.6 trillion US dollars. The value of light-enabled products and services, meaning everything that is light-enabled, is estimated to be between $7 and $10 trillion annually, which means that the science and application of light in all its forms represents roughly 11% of the world's economy. Not trivial. So zooming back in a little bit, we can talk about what we call, or what SPIE has called, core optical components. And those are all the lasers, sensors, optics, fibers, everything photonic. The global annual revenue for the core photonics part of the economy, 282 billion in 2018. Revenue from US-based core photonics companies was 64 billion. The top countries worldwide, based on revenue: Japan, USA, China, South Korea. That's the first set. The fact that one interesting piece is that the fact that many global photonics corporations are headquartered in Japan, such as Canon, Nikon, and Sharp, it gives Japan that #1 spot. When we look at core photonics producers by number of companies, there were 4,300 manufacturing companies that employ 1 million people in 2019. 915 of that 4,300 are based in the US. The majority of all the companies worldwide are small to medium-sized enterprises. However, it's the larger entities that generate most of the revenue. In fact, only 2% of all these companies generated 3/4 of the total revenue in 2018. There are over 3,000 small companies with revenues of less than $10 million, and they account for less than 3% of global revenues. But they play a vital role in filling the technology pipeline. And INRAD Optics is one of those small but important companies, and we're not alone here in the US, not by far. Of all the various types of core components, the optics, the physical optics part of the total photonics equation has been and continues to be a really core competency in the US. Now, when I say optics in this context, I'm specifically talking about two principal categories of optical components: traditional or free space optics, meaning travel in air, or fiber optics, travel in fiber. The light travels in fiber. So let's look a little bit more at fiber. Fiber optics, technically, is the contained transmission of light through long, flexible fibers of either glass or plastic. I've always liked to think of it as a light pipe. The light travels by process of internal reflection. The core medium of the fiber is more reflective than the material surrounding that core. So this causes the light to be reflected back into the core, where it can continue to travel down the fiber. The first optical fiber was patented by Corning Glass in 1970, but experiments demonstrating fiber optic principles go back to the first half of the 19th century. Optical fiber is produced by starting with a preform, which is a highly engineered cylindrical glass blank that provides the source material from which the fiber will be drawn, and that fiber is drawn in a single continuous strand. The preform is installed at the top of the tower, and this tower has all other kinds of devices on it, but the the preform is dropped into the inline furnace, and that allows this molten glob to form and drop, and that strand that follows the glob is got highly specific and highly engineered dimensions, and that strand is it's pulled mechanically, and it cools and it's spooled. And a preform can produce many hundreds to thousands of kilometers of fiber. So fiber optic cables are used for transmitting voice, images, and other data close to the speed of light. Optical fiber is most closely associated with telecommunications networks and data storage. Optical fibers form the vast pipeline through which nearly all voice, video, data communications fly instantaneously around the globe. There was a 2020 chemical engineering and news article where a gentleman from Clemson University, John Bellato, was quoted. He said nearly 500 million kilometers of optical fiber are made each year, and hardly anyone realizes that today's modern conveniences would not exist without them. There's also a significant amount of optical fiber deployed across medical applications. Fiber optics technology got its start in endoscopic imaging, and where it obsoleted many types of invasive surgery. And it's now a critical component of medical instruments besides the endoscope. The fiber optic technology allows surgeons to repair organs, to diagnose joint problems, to remove diseased tissue, and most all of these applications leave a patient with shorter recovery time than more invasive surgical methods. Polymer optical fibers, also plastic, referred to as polymer or plastic, they've been used in automotive applications really since the late 90s, and they're used for infotainment and safety systems, as well as some lighting. It is highly likely that driverless cars will expand the use of optical fiber components in the coming years. The cutting edge side of fiber is something called hollow core optical fibers. And those are a relatively new version of optical fibers, and they hold promise of an entirely new set of applications and capabilities. So now we're back to our friend Newton and his prisms. And I'll spend some time on the topic here of traditional or free space optics. Free space just means that the beam of light travels in air, as I mentioned, as opposed to fiber. So I wanted to cover this piece last when we talk about optical products or components, because these drive our industry for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's the area of optics and photonics where I spend my work life. And it's also where many, if not all, of the panelists that follow me, it's where they are focused. And we all have spent many years in this business, and we still continue to see new and amazing things that traditional optics can do. So optical components, free space, optical components, traditional, fall into two basic groups: transmissives and reflectives. Transmissives include lenses, filters, windows, optical flats, prisms, polarizers, beam splitters, and wave plates. Reflectives include mirrors and something called retroreflectors. The performance of all these elements they're often enhanced by the substrate material or the thin film coating. And the substrate materials and coatings are chosen for the wavelength of the source that they'll be used with, among other parameters. And you could spend an entire career just talking about the materials and why they're used, and the materials both in coating and the materials in the substrates. So you've got your substrate, your finish, and your coating. So when we talk about the history of lenses, I did read that there may have been rudimentary lenses dating as far back as 2000 BC. So it does seem that the term traditional is particularly appropriate. And we also know that reflective surfaces such as water have been recognized since prehistoric times. The key change happened in the 17th century, where the science of optics shifted from a theory of vision to a theory of light. The technology of optics was already well-developed field, and there were high-quality microscopes that had been built by Robert Hooke and Van Leeuwenhoek and others. Isaac Newton, and I found this piece extraordinarily interesting. Isaac Newton began his prism investigations at his family farm after escaping the plague that was ravaging London. So Sir Isaac Newton worked from home during an epidemic, which I thought was sounded oddly familiar, right? The other interesting and more scientific parallel is that Newton thought that light was composed of extremely subtle corpuscles, and this little tiny particles. And this idea is related to the definition of light as being made up of photons. His use of multiple prism arrays, described in his publication in 1702, were some of the original experiments that eventually led to the development of color or wavelength tunable lasers, which have amazing applications in our world right now. So I thought it would be more interesting if I were to, rather than to go through a litany of various lens shapes, mirror configurations, etc., I thought it might be more interesting to show you some of the transmissive optics and reflective optics that INRAD Optics produces for our customers. This green component at the top left, where it says UV filter crystal, this crystal is actually installed in a system that is installed in fighter jets, and believe it or not, Air Force One. And this crystal material helps detect an incoming missile. And when that happens, the system fires a flare, it distracts the missile, and it's called a countermeasure. Our customer has told us that there have been close to 80 pilot lives saved through the use of this system. So it makes me feel good about the work that INRAD Optics has been doing over all these years. On the top right is a multi-element assembly where all the components are precisely aligned and they serve a particular purpose. On the left, on the bottom left, is what we call an interferometer flat. This, I can't show it on PowerPoint. This is a really big optic, and it's used with a optical metrology system. But the part that this big 12-inch optics that is installed in that frame is very similar to a part that we supply into semiconductor wafer inspection. And you can imagine right now with the chip shortage, how busy we are producing those kinds of optics. On the right is what we call a heated window. It's a very complex powered optical assembly. It's got an electromagnetic interference shield so that it's against thermal effects. You know, it doesn't frost over, it doesn't get frozen. It's used as a front-facing window for targeting systems and on military helicopters. If we look at some of the mirrors we produce, on the top left, this is a mirror that is installed in tank targeting pods, and it's a line of sight mirror. It's also quite large. It's probably 14 inches by 10 at least. And those optics on the right-hand side, they're all relatively small scanning mirrors. And that big bowl-shaped optic is a high-intensity lamp reflector and collector. On the bottom, there's an optic there that is really one of our key technologies. That is it's an X-ray monochromator, and it's sort of at the edge of traditional photonics in terms of wavelength. because it works with X-rays, and it focuses that X-ray and essentially works like a mirror. Those are also used in semiconductor inspection systems. So we have a robust business, and it's a fairly unique capability for us. A couple of words about optical coatings. This photo was actually taken at INRAD Optics, and it shows the interior of a very large optical coating chamber. In the most simple explanation, coatings are reflective, such as a mirror coating, or anti-reflective in order to improve transmission. There's also filter coatings that allow a range or a single wavelength to transmit, and then beam splitter coatings that do exactly what it sounds like they do. So again, an optic starts with a substrate. We add a polished finish with often extreme specifications, and then the optical coating is deposited. So you might be thinking to yourself, where else do all these optics get consumed? Thor Labs, our panel that will follow, the folks from Thor Labs alone make thousands of optical components that are available from their vast online catalog. Some common places you'll find both custom and catalog optics are, I've shown them here, and I've chosen them rather intentionally. Defense and space. So all the arms countries are sending to Ukraine right now is going to create a demand for replacements. Optics enables every weapon system in use today. And also the defensive countermeasure systems could go from a laser rangefinder to a sophisticated satellite tracking system. And lasers are built for medical, industrial, and laser systems, medical, industrial, 3D printers. They all consume a lot of optics. And as the applications broaden, new optics are needed. The university and national labs, they have an insatiable appetite for these optics. You can ask Thor Labs, but they forge ahead with innovative research. And we haven't even talked about quantum science, this next generation of scientific discoveries. Quantum sensing and quantum imaging applications, they're going to rely very heavily on photonic technologies. The last category, process control and metrology, which really is a very large market, but it includes this exploding semiconductor market. Think chip shortage, right? We hear about it, all the time. And the US has, we're absolutely committed to making chips now in the US. Intel has committed to building the largest semiconductor facility in the world in Ohio. And just 6 days ago, they upped that commitment to an investment of $100 billion. So Intel began with a $20 billion investment in chip fab in Ohio. Why is that related to congressional acts? It's related because with the passage of the America Competes Act, Intel agreed to increase their investment by that additional $80 billion. This legislation was overwhelmingly supported by the American public, and its effects for photonics will be far-reaching. There is $52 billion for the Chips for America Act. Now, all those metrology and inspection systems, there are optics throughout the pipeline, throughout the stream. And the other really key piece that this legislation will do is it enhances outreach and access to STEM education at all levels. There are all kinds of pieces in this legislation that will help you folks, the technical educators, get your word out, get your program started. And it's very, very, very encouraging, this focus on technical education in the US. So what's ahead? Success when we overcome our challenges. So COVID challenged us, but we made it through. At INRAD Optics, we didn't have to lay off or cut salary. We had a substantial backlog to fulfill, and we were able to continue to do that. Interestingly, COVID increased demands in certain segments of the optics and photonics industry. The optics and photonics community got right to work on optical testing architectures, UV sterilization applications, and multiple other efforts. This diagram that I've got on the right side of the slide is actually a PCR test developed by a company called Iridium Spectral Technologies. And I hope you can see it's got all kinds of traditional optics, filters. I think it's got a beam splitter in there, and lenses. So COVID optics is enabling everything that's happening across the world. And the companies in optics, including INRAD Optics, we began to see this unprecedented customer demand starting in 2021. And the demand is across many markets, and it continues in 2022. Equipment manufacturers are placing orders related to this legislation I talked about. And the really good news for us is that technical education is having a renaissance. I say, thank you, hooray, it's about time. I do worry that we've lost a lot of time, and that we've got a lot of work to do to make up for it. So as John mentioned, Dr. Connolly mentioned, I have been engaged and focused on workforce development issues with legislators, educators, professional societies for at least the last 10 years. And I actually think there are several reasons that we find ourselves so behind. For years, experts told us that manufacturing in the US is over and we can't compete. Meanwhile, there were and still are lots of small, medium, and even large companies plugging away at manufacturing in the US. Corporate America, in my opinion, is also to blame. We kept wages flat to compete with overseas labor and keep profits high, but we flattened or drove down wages selectively, and often for the most important people in the manufacturing equation, the folks who make the parts. No wonder we told all our children they had to go to a four-year college whether they belonged there or not. So it doesn't matter how good your innovation is. If you don't have people to make it, it doesn't happen. Even with Industry 4.0, which will automate lots of things, when the machine goes down, someone must be trained to get it back up and running. And the technical folks will always be needed. Most US defense components and systems, they have to be made in the US. And now we're facing a national security crisis around workforce shortages. The workforce shortage threatens to crush small but important players like INRAD Optics, and deploying innovations will stall if we don't turn it around. But there is help on the horizon. Even the esteemed scientists on the committee that produced the National Academy of Sciences report, they wrote about it in 2012, and they continue to be committed to it. The committee concluded that improvements in technical education are needed to increase the quality of skilled workers in optics and photonics. There's other things on the horizon as well. I think our country is finally recognizing that we made a miscalculation in the workforce needs of the future. The Manufacturing Extension Partnership in New Jersey has a tagline that they use with workforce development programs now. They say, no colors, no collars, just careers. That's a phrase that I really like. And to the technical educators, thank you. The panel that follows will talk very specifically about the fantastic workforce programs and initiatives that are happening in Rochester, New York, and at Sussex County Community College in Northern New Jersey, where Dr. Connolly and Thor Labs have undertaken the fastest build out of an educational program I have ever witnessed. Dr. Connolly has promised me job candidates in the future, and I look forward to that when that first employee that comes to INRAD Optics from the Sussex County Community College program. Again, in closing, I'd like to thank every educator working to equip our children and our returning workers with technical skills for the many needs our country faces. And also, thank you for providing new paths for the many students who are well suited to a technical education. I think the wind is finally at your backs, and the students will come and you will help them build skills and careers that they and you will be proud of. Thanks so much.
Amy, thank you so much. Absolutely fantastic presentation and an incredibly strong finish. Appreciate your perspective on the history of the science, where we have been, where we're going, and the workforce challenge, the workforce shortage that we're facing. So extraordinary. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we do have, for everyone's benefit, a panel of speakers. We have 4 speakers on a panel. Each of these panelists will spend about 10 minutes sort of setting the context for things, and 10 or 15 minutes, and then move on to the next panelist. Questions by other panelists to engage in a conversation with each other will follow. And then we'll also at the end entertain questions from everyone gathered here. So Matt has told me that people can ask questions, and we're able to do that in this Zoom format. And so we'll be able to do that and really look forward to it to try to increase the interaction here. So the first panelist I would like to introduce you folks to is Alexis Vogt. Dr. Vogt is the endowed chair and professor of optics at Monroe Community College. We are very proud of the work that we're doing here at Sussex County Community College. We do feel, as Amy said, that we're moving along quickly. But Alexis, Dr. Vogt has been doing this for quite some time at Monroe. And it is no wonder that she has been able to do such an extraordinary job given her experience and her credentials. She, in her capacity and in her time, she, excuse me, my apologies, has secured over $6 million for the college's Optical Systems Technology program. She has grown enrollment and to an extraordinary degree. It's very, very difficult to get students to join on board, very technically oriented, somewhat unfamiliar, even though it shouldn't be, somewhat mathematical programs. She's done an extraordinary job, and there's evidence of that today with so many students here joining on board. It has grown to an enrollment, I should say the enrollment in that program has grown by 1,920%, but I think it's probably more like 1,920.2%. Dr. Vogt serves as the Executive Director of Workforce and Higher Education at AmeriCom. This is a new entity that has benefited the optics industry, relatively new in its increased role here in the optics industry and driving, increasing where we are with respect to the workforce that supports the optics industry. She earned her baccalaureate degree and her PhD in optics from the Institute of Optics at the University of Rochester. Prior to joining Monroe Community College, Dr. Vogt worked in the optics industry at Melix Griot, IDEX, Bausch & Lomb. Dr. Vogt holds 3 patents of her own. She has authored hundreds of papers, presentations, publications in the field, including the definitions of light and polarization in the World Book Encyclopedia, on and on and on. So Dr. Vogt is here today to talk to us about the unique perspective that she has about trying to answer the call for the workforce shortage, for an industry that is vital to our economy and the nation's survival. Modern life depends upon it, as Amy Eskelsen introduced us to. And Dr. Vogt is right in there making it happen and generating a whole new generation of folks who understand optics, understand the viability of the industry moving forward because of the never-ending modernization that has to take place. Dr. Vogt, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you very much, Dr. Connolly. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you here today. So thanks to you and to Sandra for the opportunity to be part of the American Technical Education Association conference today that we're holding. I'm really honored to follow Amy. Amy, thank you for your great presentation that you shared that so wonderfully highlighted the opportunities and also some of the challenges within our field. Congratulations to you and your team on your nearly 50th anniversary. That's remarkable and rad. So thank you. Where Amy left off is a perfect opportunity for me to start and talk specifically about the workforce. As Amy was saying, the workforce shortage threatens to crush us and the entire industry. And that is what we're trying to do at Monroe Community College here in Rochester, New York, to change precisely that. I'm going to share my screen here. I put together a few slides to share and provide the framework for this discussion this afternoon. This industry that we're talking about, optics and photonics industry, is huge. Amy did a wonderful job highlighting many of the applications and the areas within the optics industry. But when we talk about optics and photonics, we're talking about things that are enabling our lives that we rely upon every single day, from our smartphones, likely within an arm's reach for all of you right now, to backup cameras in cars, to autonomous vehicles, virtual reality, QR codes, Netflix, scanners in grocery stores. The list goes on and on and on. These are all light-enabled, optics and photonics-enabled technologies. If we think specifically about the national defense, Amy touched on some of these applications. The optics industry plays an enormous role protecting and securing the safety of our country and for all of us when we're talking about debris shields and missile nose cones and rovers, night vision goggles. The list goes on and on and on. But just as Amy described, this is challenging for a number of ways. Our safety and security, in fact, is being compromised because we don't have enough people to make these products. Optics technicians are needed to manufacture all of these products and more. An optics technician is someone who works with scientists and engineers in the research, development, design, manufacturing, quality control. That's the entire process, by the way, all the way through to manufacture optics, to test the optics. In the optics world, we say, if you can't measure it, you can't make it. You have to be able to measure what you've manufactured to ensure that you've manufactured it properly. A technician is the person who does that, performs the testing, the evaluation of optical components and systems. This is the problem. We have a worldwide shortage of optics technicians. We need optics technicians across the United States. Companies, all of these dots represented here, are places looking to hire optics technicians. 20% of the experienced technicians and engineers are approaching retirement. So not only do we have current openings for technicians, we have a problem where the people who are the best at this job are retiring. In Western New York, where Monroe Community College is located, we need more than 550 graduates of our program every single year. Just in Western New York, we need more than 550 skilled optics technicians. This is not a problem isolated even to the United States. 75% of small and medium-sized German companies are reporting that the shortage of skilled workers impairs their innovation activities. So you may say, what? Innovation? What do you mean? The work of the technician has to be done. Someone has to manufacture the product. Someone has to test the product. If the technician isn't there because there aren't enough technicians, someone with the advanced degree, a bachelor's, master's, or a PhD, has to do the work of the technician. Therefore, they, the bachelor's, master's, PhD, so they're not innovating. They're not creating the next best idea, innovation. They are doing the work, that's the day-to-day function of a technician. Historically, this problem has been attributed to the fact that Monroe Community College has been the world's only college awarding associate degrees in precision optics. I joined MCC, Monroe Community College, 6 years ago. At the time, there were 5 students in the program. The program was nearly closed because there were few students in the program. The equipment is expensive, takes up a lot of room, and there's no other training program awarding associate degrees within the precision optics industry. At Monroe Community College, we offer a 1-year certificate, a 2-year associate's degree, as well as a 2+2 transfer opportunity for students to come to MCC for 2 years and then transfer on for 2 additional years to receive their bachelor's degree from either the University of Rochester, Rochester Institute of Technology, or the University of Arizona's College of Optical Sciences. We've grown tremendously in the last 6 years. We graduated 41 students last year, which is an all-time high in the history of the program. The program here at Monroe Community College started in the 1960s, so it's been around for quite a while. It was largely a feeder program to Kodak, Bausch & Lomb, and Xerox. All of the big three, as we used to call them here in Rochester, declined in size and employment, and so too did the optics program here at Monroe Community College. But we are now in a rebuilding phase. We have 100 students in our program. Not only do the number of students matter, but so too do the diversity of our student body. We are 30% female, 28% students of color, not where we need to be, but we are heading in the right direction. It is imperative that we diversify our optics workforce. A number of factors have contributed to our growth. First, it would be remiss if I didn't specifically call out Thor Labs. Paul Malone, who's joining the panel today, has been a huge advocate of our program and has been supporting us in a monetary way that's been incredibly valuable to our program. Additionally, Sidor Optics, Corning, and a couple of grants that I brought in, one from the National Science Foundation, another one from the Office of Naval Research, part of the Department of Defense. That most recent funding, the $4.4 million, came because of this crisis we have in our nation's security. If we don't have enough optics technicians, we cannot safely protect our entire nation. And so the Department of Defense is behind the work that we're doing here at Monroe Community College so that we can create more skilled optics technicians. When you think about the trades, we've heard many opportunities exist for jobs in the trades. Whether you're plumbers, electrician, welder, there are jobs available right now. So too is the case for the optics industry. But one differentiator within the optics industry is that the only training program for precision optics had been at Monroe Community College. If you think about some of the other trades, they have apprenticeship programs, they have trade schools. In the optics world of precision optics, it was Monroe Community College and that was it. We've since changed that. We have a precision optics manufacturing apprenticeship that we are rolling out around the country, so that we can provide training not only for people who are located here in Rochester, New York, and can come to campus to take our classes, but also for employers around the nation, so that they too can train their employees. We have created online classes so that we can reach people around the country. This program, the apprenticeship program, was created originally by Optimax and has since been rolled out at JML Optical, Sidor Optics, OptiPro, LaCroix Precision Optics in Arkansas, as well as New Tech Precision Optical Corporation in Maryland. As part of the Department of Defense grant, I was able to hire an expert in the field of apprenticeships, my colleague Ross McCauley, who is on our call today. He is the Monroe Community College Optics National Work-Based Learning Coordinator. He works with all of these companies to create optics apprenticeships. He is currently working with Yen Optics, Zygo, Archer Optics, EFCO Optics, Schott, Thor Labs, and Corning to start apprenticeships in their respective companies. But we are seeking additional optics companies to join us. This is a way in which we can train the future workforce. And so we are actively pursuing other optics companies. So please do reach out if you are interested in joining part of our precision optics apprenticeship program at your company. We offer state-of-the-art equipment. We have over 3,500 square feet of labs, over $2 million in new advanced manufacturing equipment installed in the last year. By the way, if anyone's ever in Rochester, please come to our labs. We would love to have you join and see what we're doing here on campus. We work very closely with high school partnerships. My friend Paul Conroe is one of the panelists here. He is a high school teacher at East High School here in Rochester. He works very closely with his students to teach MCC optics in his high school, and I'll have him share more of those details, but we do that through what we call our dual enrollment partnership. So we have 16 high schools in the Rochester region we partner with. with an interest to expand these partnerships outside of the Rochester area. So if you have connections to other high schools, please reach out to me so that we can introduce the Introduction to Optics class that I teach here on campus into your high school. Over 1,000 students have participated, and we also work very closely with optics companies to create summer internships that are paid for our students so that they can get that hands-on experience. The connections with industry are what drive everything that we do. We have a very active optics advisory board. We are teaching industry validated curriculum, and all 14 of our faculty and adjunct come from the optics industry, which is critical to our success, so that we can properly train people the way in which they need to have the skill sets available when they enter the workforce. The students that we're looking for, we're not in fact looking for math whizzes. We are looking to hire and bring into our program, enroll in our MCC Optics program, artists, musicians, gamers, chefs, automobile mechanics, bicycle mechanics, athletes. These are people who make excellent optics technicians because they have fantastic hand-eye coordination. These are the students we need at Monroe Community College. These are the students that we need at Sussex County Community College. We can then teach them the optics and turn them into optics technicians. Dr. Connolly mentioned AmeriCom during the introduction. AmeriCom is the American Center for Optics Manufacturing, the backbone of America's precision optics industry. One of the ways in which AmeriCom is partnering and working in the United States is to roll out precision optics training programs around the country, so that Monroe Community College is no longer the only community college awarding associate degrees in precision optics. We have been working very closely with Sussex County Community College. You'll hear from my colleague, Brian Lake, in a few moments. Also with Front Range Community College in the Boulder, Colorado area, and Valencia College in Florida to create precision optics training programs so that we can grow this workforce. We can no longer supply the workforce alone just here in Rochester, New York at Monroe Community College. I thank you all very much for the opportunity to join today to share a bit about this really exciting industry and the opportunities that are ahead of us. I invite you all to visit our website, www.monroecc.edu/go/optics. Please do reach out to me with my email address as provided there, avogt4@monroecc.edu. If you have any interest in partnering, whether it's through a high school partnership or an industry partnership or joining our apprenticeship program, and we would love any additional support and help. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Dr. Connolly, I will pass it back to you.
Alexis, thank you so much. Absolutely terrific. Again, sort of framing the challenge and framing the opportunity, framing the need, and framing the solution. And you have participated as perhaps among the most important people in changing the direct, essentially changing our stars in the optics industry. So thank you so much. So where and when does a person begin to think about how to do what Alexis has done at Monroe Community College? Her contribution now in the national environment is clear, but my colleague in crime, so to speak, Paul Malone, is on the panel today, and he approached me about 3 or 4 years ago. And when he did, he said, "Do you think maybe we could do this?" And I said, "Yes, we can, with help." And Paul is not disappointed. He had something in mind when he approached me. He believed that it was possible. I believed that it was possible, but it can't be done without the knowledge inside the industry. And Paul has brought that. Naveed Entazarian is also here. He's not a panelist today, but we have relied heavily upon the people at Thor Labs, Naveed included, led by Paul, to move us forward. Without that partnership, we would, Sussex County Community College, be nowhere. And so, Paul, if you'd be so kind as to just talk to us a little bit about, I suppose, first of all, your experience. Your career is a really very cool one, if I just may simply use that colloquial phrase, and where you are now. So just talk a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and then how we got here and what is happening at Thor Labs and in our collaboration together.
Sure. Thanks, John. Wow. Great presentations by Amy and Alexis. I consider them both good friends as well as colleagues. And then we've worked together over the last at least 4 years and way beyond that, actually. Yeah, thanks for that introduction, John. So I have a few slides, but before I get into that, and I think I'll be brief. So my background is I started out as a technician, right? So I've been in the industry now for 40, this is my 43rd year, which is, that in itself is remarkable that it's gone fast, but I would say the beginning of my career was dedicated, and maybe even longer than that, dedicated to being on the floor and, you know, hands-on manufacturing of optics. So, you know, I've seen the industry from that beginning, and, you know, real quick, you know, there was I think Amy alluded to it in her presentation that, you know, there was you know, we ended up, and Alexis as well, a shortage of optics technicians and, you know, optics people, opticians. You know, opticians are, especially from a city like Rochester where Kodak was, there was, you know, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s, lots of opticians. But as some of those companies started to go away because of different reasons, technology was shifting or things like that, those jobs started to disappear, like Amy had mentioned in her presentation. And then there was this gap that really, you know, became a real problem in our industry, because so many jobs started to, you know, leave this country, and it created this void that we're still dealing. To this day, we're paying for that, and it's you know, I've been in this industry a long time now, and I have a lot of great colleagues and old friends that are still, you know, plugging away in this industry, and we, you know, we kind of always knew that was happening, and, you know, we always found ways to compete with cheaper labor overseas and things like that. But anyway, and then the second part of my career really was, I got a chance. So I'm just a guy from Paterson, New Jersey. I don't have a college education. My education was on the optics floor. I learned, you know, how to make optics, and I learned how to deal with people and manage people. And I got a chance to meet many great people. And in the late 90s, I got to meet Alex Cable, who is the CEO of Thor Labs, and we'll talk about that on the slides a little bit. And at the same time, Amy Eskelson, and I was able to co-found a company called NovaPhase back in the late 90s. And I found myself not too far into that, getting to hang out with some remarkable, wonderful people. And I can remember sitting there and just thinking to myself, how did I get here? I am the luckiest guy in the world. And, you know, I think that's a good point to make too, is that, you know, you can start out your journey, and hopefully it's a journey that includes optics. You can start that journey, and you could, you know, start at the very floor of the industry, and you can get to a point where you maybe you own your own company, or you work for a wonderful company like Thor Labs. I've been now with Thor Labs for 15, 16 years, and prior to that, I had my own company. So it's a cool story. I get to you know, work with a lot of young people. You know, we're gonna, I guess, like, maybe it's a good time for me to kind of share my screen. Yeah, so like John said, he asked me to share a little bit about my background. Obviously, a lot of that includes being here at Thor Labs, and I'll start out by talking about Thor Labs. You know, so Thor Labs wonderful company started by Alex Cable back in 1989. And just a little thing about Alex, you know, he came out of school. He went to work at Bell Labs, and New Jersey has a rich history in optics and photonics because of Bell Labs, and a lot of crystal growth was done there. Tremendous work was done there. And when Alex was there, he was there in the mid to late 80s. He was working for Steve Chu. And if many of you don't know who Steve Chu is, Steve Chu was, at one point, he was an energy secretary for the United States. I think he was the 12th energy secretary. But Steve Chu also is a Nobel laureate. He ended up winning the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1997, and Alex Cable was in Steve's lab, and it was part of that. So pretty cool story. You know, and then, you know, Steve went and did something else after he left Bell Labs, and Alex went and started Thor Labs. So, and it's kind of, we're tucked away here in northwestern New Jersey. I don't think a lot of people really think of this part of New Jersey when they think of New Jersey, but they should, because it's a wonderful place with lots of, you know, just beautiful scenery and great people, and not too many traffic jams. So, you know, I'm big on that. But anyway, so Thor Labs, right? It's a photonic tools company. So, you know, we have a catalog. You can go on www.thorlabs.com, and you can, I don't even know how many, well, it says here 22,000 products, but I think it's more than that, actually. But anyway, we have it's a global company. So when I, you know, I know when Amy Eskelson was part of Thor Labs back in the early to mid 90s, and I came here and met her and Alex and a few other people. I think the company at that time was about $20 million in revenue and maybe 50 employees. And so now globally, we're in 26 locations, which includes 820,000 square feet. You know, we're up over $600 million in revenue. So if you think about it in the terms of, you know, 25 years ago at 20 million, and now you're here, and you can see the tremendous growth that Thor Labs has had. And, you know, it really is an amazing thing. And I've been lucky. I've gotten like a front row seat at this thing. So, and a little bit of part of it. So 22,000 products. You know, one of the great things about Thor Labs, you know, a lot of people ask me about Thor Labs and the success of Thor Labs. And there's a couple of there's a few things, but I always talk about, you know, the customer centricity that Thor Labs has, and that came directly from Alex Cable. And, you know, you see right here this picture of Lab Snacks. Well, we make 22,000 plus products, but I think the most popular thing that I ever get asked about is Lab Snacks, and how thankful our customers are for thinking about them and providing these Lab Snacks for no charge that come in their shipments of whatever they're buying, optics or similar products. So, you know, but that's part of the customer centricity. And, you know, the one of our slogans for years was we're all ears, you know. So I think, you know, if you wanted to speak to our CEO, Alex Cable, all you had to do was write him an email, and he responded. And you know, that really says something to me. And, you know, when I look at things the way I look at things, I refer to my personal life. I don't know what else to do, right? So when I'm dealing with companies, I expect them to be like Thor Labs. And unfortunately, that isn't always the case. And I get spoiled by what we do at Thor Labs here. And but there are some companies that are responsive and they're listening to their customers, and I always do appreciate that. But you you know, if I could point to one thing, that's really something I think Thor Labs has done a really great job with. Some of the core markets served here, and you know, Amy spoke eloquently about you know, conventional optics and the components that basically what I do here, but photonics, life science, defense, and security, just to name a few. Many other things outside even of the optics group. Moving along, so we're a global company. These are some of the locations. I think we're in 8 countries at this point. I think at this, I probably have been to all of these locations. I know one of the special areas for me, I think 2007 or 8, we started a sales office in Shanghai, China. And we quickly went from a sales office there to a manufacturing site. So I had a hand in that, and that's another great thing is, you know, I was, you know, started out as an optician, and here I am getting a chance to see the world and go, you know, and meet lots of great people and do lots of cool things. So that's the global piece of it. I know this is a little small, but I'll read through it quick. So New Jersey, so where we are here, you know, I think at this point we have 8 locations just in New Jersey alone. They're all manufacturing sites. We're over 500,000 square feet in Newton here. We're just putting up our new facility, Quantum Leap. It's on Quantum Leap Drive. So that's going to be 150,000 square feet that we're currently moving into right now. It's very exciting. The building that I'm in is 125,000 square feet, and Amy Eskelson had a big responsibility in this building being built that I'm sitting in right now, and I got to work on that committee as well. But in New Jersey here we have 1,100 employees, which is amazing. We have, I think up until now, we have about 50 new hires. We have a hope, you know, to Alexis's point, I mean, we have so many job openings right now, and and a lot of them are technical jobs, and it's been a real battle and real struggle. And, you know, I am also waiting for us to start bearing the real fruit, where we can start to see all these students come out of the programs and really get it deployed and working in this business, because it's sorely needed. As you can see here, and then some of the different kinds of jobs that we have here, I mean, basically you name it, you know, it goes sales, engineering, manufacturing, planning, accounting, graphic artists, admin, managing, scientist. I mean, there's nothing, everything's available here. And you know, a little plug for Thor Labs, if you go on our website, you can go into our careers page and you can see all the jobs that are being posted. It's you know, every year we do a budget, and we put in the, you know, the CapEx budget, and then we put in the people budget, and we actually never get to hire enough people to match the people we had in the budget. So it's kind of like, you know, the jobs are there, they're just not getting filled all the time. You know, and I'll get into this in the next slide, but so to John's point, you know, I did come to John. I was invited to go to a symposium in Rochester, New York, by a fellow named Jim Sidor, who is a great friend of mine. And I went, and it was being put on by Americom, and the keynote speaker was Adele Radcliffe. And I got to tell you, I mean, there's inspirational speakers, and then there's Adele. So, you know, when I was there, I mean, I'm talking about it and the hair on my arms are standing up, but it was such a unbelievable presentation. And I walked out of that room that day, and I just couldn't believe, there were so many things that she touched on that resonated with me. And there was no way I could, I would ever be the same, really. And I don't want to over dramatize it, but it really was a meaningful couple of days for me. And I did come back to Newton, and I think I reached out to Dr. Connolly pretty quick. And, you know, between Sussex County College and Thor Labs, there was already something going on with the mechanics side of the business, where, you know, he was already going down a path with a program for machinists. So, you know, there was some things to work together on because there was some of that groundwork was already laid. But I did, you know, came back from that, talked to John, and we started to, you know, the great thing about that whole time was everybody was a yes. It wasn't like, well, I don't know, or no, or it was really enjoyable because everybody came to that place where open-minded, let's talk about it. And, you know, it was a very positive experience. But I got to tell you, there's lots of great people on John's team at Sussex County. I've worked with many of them, and also, you know, same here with Thor Labs, INRAD Optics. We kind of put together this little consortium of New Jersey companies that are geographically close by and made sense. I mean, we reached out to a lot of people, but it was a real challenge. And there's lots of other companies here in New Jersey that could be part of this, but they're not. And I hope someday that changes. But certainly INRAD Optics has always been there. Special Optics, ESCO Optics, Navitar, which is a Rochester company that actually owns Special Optics, but I've worked a lot with those guys, Julian Goldstein there, and it's a great bunch of people. So let me get into one of the last slides. So a little bit about the program here. So I mentioned Adele Radcliffe, and, you know, I look forward to actually, you know, hearing her speak again. But, you know, once we got back here and we started to think about doing it here, I think one of the very next things I did was reached out to Alexis, and Alexis was invited to come down to Thor Labs. She did a fantastic presentation as always, and it had a great attendance. There was many people here at Thor Labs and other people it was a lunch and learn talk. But she came down, and, you know, she's always been very helpful with my team here at Thor Labs, with John's team over at the college. So I can never thank you enough, Alexis. And, you know, also along the way, you know, Amy Eskelson, I've spent a lot of time with her talking and you know, strategizing over stuff like this, as well as the people in these other companies. But the status right now is, you know, we have some examples. You know, it's a 2-year program. It's really a hands-on program. I wanted that to, you know, be the key focus, because I'm a hands-on guy, and we have lots of hands-on work. So, and people, you know, we still got to battle you know, people get a little scared off by the math when it comes to optics. And, you know, I think we've had people, you know, drop out because of that. And, you know, so we've learned some lessons too about how we teach it here, and what the curriculum looks like, because, you know, we got to find a way to, you know, make sure that it's inclusive, and we don't, we still want to, you know, you still have to learn this stuff, but we want to get these people in here and really, you know, start to make opticians and technicians out of them. So we have some examples here. So Pete, we've had, I think we graduated out of Sussex County 7 technicians. I think this year we're on track to graduate 3, but there's still a lot of work to do. I know Brian Lake, we meet with this school every 2 weeks, and Brian has been doing a great job. Brian is, I'm just happy we were able to find him. And I know he's gotten a lot of support from Alexis and the school up in Rochester as well. So I think, you know, we're also working with AmeriCom. Alexis made the point, you know, we got some funding for that, and you know, some of the manufacturing tools have already landed here in Sussex County, and we're really excited. And I know everybody's working really hard to make expand this program and make it as good as it can be. And lastly, I got my last slide here, which is the traveling roadshow. So this was a photo. That's Naveed and Tazarian, Amy Eskelson, Jamie Lactor, and myself. And this was a trip that we had made up to Rochester to go see Alexis and speak to some of her students. And but these are the people, at least on the Thor Labs side of things and the industry side of things, that have really, you know, made this thing happen. And I can't thank everybody enough. Such a lot of support and great relationships, and it's definitely a highlight for me. So with that being said, I just want to thank everybody. I hope that was interesting, and I look forward to you know, seeing everybody in person someday soon. Thank you.
Paul, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. You know, really gives a lay of the land. Here at Sussex County Community College, our deepest, most important partner is Thor Labs, and you cannot overestimate, or frankly, depending upon your point of view, underestimate the value of having deep partnerships and trying to pull something like this off. We have been able to, quote unquote, stand up an optics technology education program for certificate and for an AAS degree, pathways towards baccalaureate degrees as well, only because we've got great partners. And Thor Labs has just been a tremendous partner. Monroe Community College has been a tremendous partner, and all of that comes together. But you have to, so having the right people engaged is the key. But Sussex County Community College also has to have the right people, and having the right person who would lead this program be, in essence, the Alexis is what we always say. We need an Alexis at Sussex County Community College. Who is going to be the person who will lead this? Who will be the person who will blast through the bedrock, chop down the trees, have both the expertise and the skill to be able to partner with industry, and frankly, humility to be brave. No one knows it all here, and we're doing groundbreaking work. To believe that we can stay in the comfort zone of what we know will not work. And we needed someone with the attitude and disposition to be able to make that happen. And for Sussex County Community College, it was Brian, who already had, as a physicist, experience teaching children in a somewhat difficult environment where he was yearning to be creative and to break out and to know, I know how to do this. Please let me. Wait a second. Let me say it again. I know how to do this. Please let me. And so he was ready and ripe to be in that environment. And we're proud at Sussex we are able to do that. So Brian, if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself a little bit and talk to us about where we are at Sussex.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks a lot for that introduction. I'm honored to be even spoken in the same breath as Alexis's name. I have a little bit of stuff to share as well, so I'm just going to throw this up while I'm speaking. I don't have a lot to show. A lot of it was already said by the two people who already spoke before me, but I guess a little background on myself first, just to kind of catch everyone up, since I'm kind of a new face to a lot of people here. As Dr. Connolly had said, I'm Brian Lake. I went to school up in Rochester, actually, which is kind of how I got involved in this whole thing. I had a friend who went to Alexis's program, and when I was trying to find a job, I reached out to him, he reached out to Alexis and I spoke, and then she put me in contact with Dr. Connolly, and now I'm here. So funny how that works out. But I got a master's degree from RIT. I'm actually an astrophysicist by training, so not too far off of what we're doing currently. Once I got off of that, actually, while I was still working on my thesis work, I went to Pope John out at Pope John the 23rd High School out in Sparta, in New Jersey. I worked there for a year developing physics curriculum, developing innovation curriculum for the students there, and I decided that I wanted something a little bit more. So instead of developing curricula for 2 classes, I took on a position that had me assisting in building an entire new program from the ground up. So some might say that's a bit of a step up. And it's been a really, really wild ride, but I've been enjoying myself thoroughly. So I guess I can just take a little bit of time to talk about what we do specifically down here at Sussex County Community College, since a lot of the more broad generals have been covered between Amy, between Alexis, between Paul. So you already have heard a bunch of people talk about, what we need to do, why we need to do it, what it is we're doing. So I guess I'll take a look at a very specific sort of microcosm here, give you a bit of insight as to what it looks like for one of these programs to sort of, bud up out of effectively really nothing other than a desire to do it. So let's just jump right into it. The most important thing, and this has been stated many, many times, and I will continue to elaborate on this, is the importance of having industry partners for this kind of project. We work really closely with Thor Labs. I talk to Paul and Naveed and Jamie in combination at least, probably 10 times a week between the 3 of them. So they've been a huge help. Of course, we've also got INRAD and Amy. Thank you again for all the support you've been giving us, and other companies in the local area as well, mainly ESCO and Special Optics. Having them around is really, really helpful. And I honestly don't think it would be possible to make a program like this without a substantial assistance from industry partners. And let me tell you why. Dr. Connolly said something that I honestly wasn't expecting. He mentioned that humility is a really important aspect for someone doing what I'm doing. And he's definitely right in that I like to try to be humble, because I'll be completely blunt. I don't know half of the stuff that this program is going to try to teach these students. If you told me to go and sit down on a CNC lathe or a CNC machine, I would not know the first thing about how to operate it beyond what I've already learned. And when I came in, that was nothing. I know I don't know it all, but I do know who does. And it's these people who work in these industries. And because of that, every single one of our instructors outside of the few courses that I do teach are industry professionals. Most of them come from Thor Labs. We actually have someone from INRAD this semester. His name is John Norton. He's been doing a fantastic job with our advanced optical systems course. But we've got people like Matt Debris, we've got people like Ryan Simmons, Naveed actually taught a few of our courses in the past, just doing the things that they know, because I don't, and I know that, and most people don't. We are in this position of needing more of these programs because there aren't a lot of people that know what they're doing. So why not reach out to those few as sort of the masters of their craft? So I'm very, very thankful to have such a powerful selection of people to work with. So again, just a bit of a thank you to those who are here for your continued support on that front. I'm not going to talk about this too much. It's a lot of words. I honestly just took all of the things just to show how many there were, but our main sort of like selling point, I suppose, as to what we've been working towards is this AAS track. It's a 2-year program to get a degree for an applied Associates of Science. There we go. Lost the word there for a second. In optical technology, effectively. This program is designed to teach students everything they need to know to jump right into being a technician. And we found a lot of success with it in 2 different ways, actually. Right now, all of our current graduates, the ones who have already graduated, were in industry already. And I'm sure Naveed and Paul can confirm that every single one of them, there were 6 of them, a 7th one to be graduating soon, actually. They have all kind of stepped up from where they originally came in from and effectively I don't want to say got retrained, but they got trained in the areas that they didn't know. So they now are kind of a wealth of knowledge across multiple different aspects of this wider field. We also have currently graduating, there's one of them, and then in the current pipeline, there's another. So people who are first year students this year, 2 people that have not been involved in the industry ever, who are going to be coming out with degrees in this field. One of them got a job over at ESCO. The other, I believe, is still actually pursuing getting a job at Thor once, in the middle of this whole program, which is amazing. These people aren't even out of school yet, and they're already helping the industry, which is awesome. I love to see that. But this is kind of our main track that we've been, I don't want to say pushing, but it's the main track that we've been focusing on because it's the one that kind of gives the most general overview of everything we do. And a technician coming out of that can kind of just do anything that you need them to, which is awesome. From conventional to CNC to metrology, it doesn't really matter. They have the skill set. We also do have 3 one-year certs. And a lot of this is modeled based on what Alexis has done up at MCC. So it's not really novel per se, but it's still important. And I think this sort of methodology is really useful for anybody who's looking to make something like this happen, like we're doing out in Colorado or down in Florida through AmeriCom, which is really, really great. But we have specific tracks for CNC conventional metrology, which can all matriculate upwards. So if someone comes in and they're a CNC tech and, say, Amy over at INRAD wants to make sure that they have a new CNC tech trained up to meet the level and the standard of someone who's been working there for a few years. They come in, they take the CNC cert, and then they say, well, you know what, I actually want to learn more. They can actually finish off the AAS with the other courses they missed, which is awesome. So next, I have a bunch of pictures because I like pictures. I'm a visual person. These are some shots of students that we have had, and a few have graduated, a few have not. Over here on the left, you can actually see Naveed teaching, and you can notice that this is during COVID. These are pre-COVID. But these 3 students are actually going to be graduating this May, which is awesome. This right here is actually Michael. He's the one who, actually, let me grab this. This one right here, his name is Michael. He did not have any introduction to the optics industry before he came in. Now he works with us over here is Emily, works with her over at ESCO. And then of course we have Sarah who works at Thor. They're all going to be graduating in the May. These 4 right here were all people who worked at Thor, and they've all graduated since. And I know them all personally, which is awesome. We're a small enough program that we can do that. Hopefully we'll be a big enough program that it'll be difficult soon. Now, this is the part I really like to talk about because this is awesome and I'm really, really happy with it. And I wish I had more pictures, but this building right here is one of the buildings on our campus. This is called the R building. Now, when this entire thing started, before I was even involved, one major problem was identified. We need to have our own space on campus to do this, because right now we're sort of like doing half and half. We have some things like the fundamentals courses, which I do, which can be taught with whiteboard space, table space, and a few precision optics. But then you have CNC manufacturing, which you need a Satislow or an Optifab machine to do it. So we've been using Thor Labs space and Thor Labs shop time effectively. And we identified before I even got here that that was really important, that we can do our own thing. We could have our own building. So we took an old building and we retrofitted it. The R building now went from an automotive space, which was basically just normal classrooms. We took it apart, we gutted the entire thing, we replaced everything into a brand new workspace effectively that was ready to take these machines. These are really old pictures, actually. This was actually about a year ago at this point. So this is what the building kind of looks like now. There's more stuff in there, which I don't have pictures of, unfortunately. I thought I did, but I could not find them earlier today, which is sad. But I do have pictures of the Satislow machinery, which we got through AmeriCom, which is the first step in getting our students all on campus to run things like daytime classes and take them off of the shop floor over at Thor to free up their time. So this is kind of what we're focusing on right now, and it's really exciting. Sorry, I keep saying that. It's just true. Beyond that, though, something sort of seems to get left out a lot. Not saying that it was left out. Alexis did a very good job of pointing it out. But when people think about these types of programs, they often think, okay, what are we going to do at the college level? How are we going to get more students enrolled in the college, et cetera, et cetera, college, college, college. What about beyond that? One of the big things that I'm really, really happy we've been able to do, and Dr. Connolly's been a huge help on this, is reaching out to high schools. I think out of all of the methodologies of getting people involved in this industry, reaching out to the high schools is incredibly helpful. Incredibly. If you can get them interested early, even if you only get 10% of them, if you go and you get concurrent enrollment options with 100 students and only 10%, or heck, even 5%, it's still 10 and 5 new students coming in. And that's just a start. Right now, between these 3 schools, Hopatcon High School, Newton High School, and Sussex County Technical School, I always mess that one up, we've got 33 concurrent students. So even if only, 5% of them decide to actually do something, that's still 2 or 3 more students we did not have and would have never known about this industry. And who knows, maybe some of them will go off and do something and they'll say, you know what, this isn't for me, but I do remember that there was this other option for me to go and do optics, to become a technician. So I think it's imperative that we do this. And the way that we've actually done this is interesting. We had 3 different delivery methods. At Hopatcon, I go in there and I teach every day, excluding today because of the panel. At Newton, I had a co-teacher model where we had one of their teachers who was actually also a physicist and material scientist teach the class, and then I would come in and do labs and such with them, bring them into our space and show them some of the precision optics and bring them into Thor to show them the machinery. And then at Sussex Tech, they actually have someone who is, I think she's actually trained as a biologist, but she's been teaching physics for the past, I think, 5 to 10 years, teaching the class completely on her own with just me there as support to make sure everything's online, to get her into places like the college to see what we do there, and get the students into Thor labs, which is something we're working on actually to be ready. I think the current ETA is like end of April, early May. We're going to get like all 20 of them in. It's going to be awesome. But speaking of Thor labs tours, let me go to this slide first. Speaking of Thor labs tours, it's something we do a lot. These are a bunch of students from a different, not a high school, but a different group. This is called this is the New Jersey Youth Corps. It's part of a thing called Project Self-Sufficiency. These are students between the ages of, I think, 16 and 18 is the age range. It's a pretty small window. I can't remember exactly what it was. But these are students who are not involved in traditional high schools. I think it's actually like 16 to 20, but these are students who aren't involved in traditional high schools working towards, it's not their GED, but something equivalent to it. And we reached out to the PSS and said, hey, we've got an opportunity for people who aren't taking like traditional 4-year college tracks. Do you want to do something? And they said, that would be awesome. Let's get them in to see Thor. So we brought him in. We showed them all of the state-of-the-art stuff we do. This is Sean Turner. He's one of our adjuncts who actually works at Thor. This person I like to talk about, because this is amazing, and I'll come back to him. And then, of course, we have Naveed again. And we showed them everything. We showed them our CNC, their CNC. I'm not a Thor Labs person, but we showed them CNC. We showed them conventional. We showed them all the optical test machinery. We showed them some of the fiber department. We showed them some of the precision optics department. It was awesome. It was really, really cool. And the other thing is high school. This is Hopatcon High School's class. I go in and teach there every day. This was taken a few months ago at this point. I was running a laser maze lab with them to sort of get them inundated into the idea of reflections and all of that fun stuff. But they're a great group of kids. I love them. The last thing I want to mention is also not a novel concept, but one in addition to the whole getting into high schools thing that I think is imperative to forming anything like this at any location. This right here, his name is Sam Suarez. He was a student of ours and he graduated last spring. We said, Sam, do you want to teach standards of optics once you've graduated? And he said, heck yeah, Brian, I want to teach standards of optics. So we brought him in. He taught standards of optics. I speak with all the students during the semester because I see them all. He was one of our most raved about instructors. They loved him. And he had awesome scores throughout the board. Everybody knew exactly what they were doing. And he was one of our graduates. And this was something Naveed had planned for when he designed the program before I got here, was this revolving door approach to say, all right, we've got someone like Sam comes in, takes the courses, and then if he has a particular subject he's very knowledgeable about, very interested in, he teaches that subject afterwards. And we keep getting this whole rotating door effect, this revolving door, where we get new people in, maybe people who aren't involved in the industry, they learn, then they go work, and then they come back and they teach for us. And we just basically build up the industry from that, because that's what we need. It's been said many times before, but we need people. We need not just anybody, we need people that know what they're doing. And if we can get a steady flow of people in and make those people who come in our new instructors, we've just solved two problems at once. It's really, really, really important. And I think that's basically everything I have to say about this, other than, you know, a continued thanks from everybody involved, because everyone's awesome. And yeah, I think that's where I'll leave it. Thank you all for your time.
Ryan, thank you so much. I will tell you that there's so many great things about this program that are happening. One of the things that I am the most proud about, just as a specific point, is this initiative with Project Self-Sufficiency. Jamie Lacouture is here present. I don't know if the idea originated with her, but it feels like it probably did. Jamie, thank you so much. I mean, just this kind of innovative approach, reaching in, reaching around, reaching down, reaching up, is just phenomenal. And the idea that the youth corps participants would have access to Thor Labs and the aspirational component of that is just it's a great breakthrough. And there are other possibilities along the way too. Brian mentioned how important it is for us to be reaching into the high schools and working with that. And so I am pleased to introduce Paul Conroe. Paul Conroe teaches optics and physics at East High School in Rochester. Paul has spent his first 10 years teaching traditional physics science courses. And then in 2008, there was an opportunity, an innovation program at East High School. And if I remember the story correctly, there wasn't anybody interested in using the free money coming to the high school, and said, no, either it's too much work or can't do it. I can't imagine what I'll do. Paul Conroe said, I'll think of something. And so I think that that's kind of where, not necessarily just the idea, but the ability to execute on an idea. And Paul does not let any resource go unused. He continues to ride this train of helping high school students and maybe even middle school students. Paul, you'll need to help me in on that, and in the work that he's been doing in Rochester. So I'm going to pass this off to Paul Conroe. Paul, thank you so much for carving out a substantial portion of your day, which in high school is very difficult to do. So I want to thank you so much for being here.
I'm very pleased to be here, and I just ushered out, or I dismissed a room of study hall students, so I have a pretty free reign from here now. But yeah, I'm Paul Conroe. I'm a 20-year veteran science teacher in Rochester, New York. About 10 years into my career, I kind of, through a string of serendipity, I had, unfortunately for the student at the time, I had a 7th grader who couldn't see the board very well when I moved him to the back of the room. And it turned out that Cedric needed glasses. He was a 7th grader. I called mom, I called the nurse. Cedric needs glasses. And that was in October. And I remember the day because it was Valentine's Day when he comes in with glasses. And I'm like, oh, great, Cedric, I'm so glad that you have this pair of glasses. But, you know, it's 21st century in America, and a kid goes a couple of months without glasses just because the system. And so I said, you know, it'd be interesting if high school students were taught to make glasses for their classmates. You know, like here's a clear need. Cedric's just one of, you know, many kids in Rochester. Rochester's certainly classifies as a high needs urban district. Serendipity number one, I guess, is the fact that my colleague Logan, who taught in the room above me, AP biology, had spent 4 years in the Navy as an optician. So he had the licensing to both teach science and he could dispense classes. So he and I pitched the idea around the district, and they were like, "Oh, that's great. Let's make that happen." And while we were pitching that idea, we came to learn that Rochester is home to this international hub of optical manufacturing. I have zero optical manufacturing experience. I've toured many of the local sites in Rochester, but when I heard it is such an economic engine for our community, I said, I want my kids to have a piece of that pie. So when people hear the Cedric Needs Glasses story, their heart melts. And so New York State has made a habit of giving me and Logan hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for the last couple of years, or for the last 10 years, to fund these programs. So Logan does vision care, I do precision optics, and precision optics takes the lion's share of the money. And what we've done is we've proven, this is a tagline for people in the optics industry, we have empirical evidence that 15-year-olds can make 10th wave optics. And if you don't know what a 10th wave optic is, you'll learn. And so, what really, what the message I want to deliver today is that we need high schools, specifically high school teachers, and the workforce, and in this case, we'll narrow it to optics manufacturing. They need to interface. Teachers need to come on site to see what it is adults do for money. And then, because kids, high school kids are, whether they're a captive or captivated audience, right? Like they're kind of coming to school oftentimes against their will, but they're still coming almost every day. Let's do something with them in addition to the academic preparation that we are doing so well with current trends in education. So I kind of have this emphasis that I went and toured optics companies in Rochester. I looked at what the majority of the workforce adults were doing. They weren't in a cubicle behind a laptop. They were on the floor making product. And I said, we need more of that balance in a high school. So it's kind of the desk equates to a laptop, that kind of a position. And then a machine shop, in our case, glass, mirrors the adults who are out up and down running, making the optics, the artisans, the skilled craftsmen and women. So after touring companies and then having this money, I was able to kind of prove the concept. Can we teach kids as teenagers the skills of an adult? And this has been done for years in technical education programs, automotive, wood shop, metal shop. This is not something that I invented or created, but it is something that I think the trend is that we're getting back towards it. And I think the more, kind of to echo Brian's point, he hit the nail right on the head. If you have 20 kids who are 15, 16, 17 years old, and they get a chance to experience what it is that the workforce demands, if 2 or 3 of them like it, every year times however many classes you're doing this for, that's going to help close the gap that Alexis pointed out in terms of the technician shortage. It's certainly not going to close it completely, but it's going to help. And I really think, I guess my word is, we got to think about high schools as a smart place to invest. And I think that the business community needs to help define what smart is. Because right now, educators kind of define and drive what happens in a high school. And they're doing great. American education system's great. We feed colleges, great. But there's this disconnect of what the employers want and what high schools create. So I'm going to pose this last question, and this might be, kind of I'll wrap up my story. But if we consider high schools to be a business, who is the customer? And think about that. If you were to be asked, who is the customer for high school education? I argue it's certainly not parents. it really isn't the kid. The kid doesn't really want what they're getting there most often. And we're all teenagers. If somebody said, hey, if you could only have spent another hour a day in high school, would you be like, oh yeah, that would have been great sitting through more classes? I suggest that the customer of high school is the workforce, and that fundamentally high schools need to ask our customer, what do you want? And then deliver on that. And so it's this, my big feel-good message for everybody to like who come together is that if employers are the customer and high schools reach out to them and say, what do you want? What do you need? It's not an overhaul. It's not a complete redesign of high school. It's adjusted. You know, you're still going to teach history, civics, health class, you know, gym, you know, PE, but we could do even better if we think about that point of view. And it just so happens that, you know, I kind of fell into this really cool industry, which is optics in Rochester. And we know that, you know, we could open up a dozen optics shops in probably 20 different cities in the next 10 years, and we're still going to have customers that need optics. So it's definitely a growth industry. And yeah, it doesn't just have to be optics, but I'm glad that it is for me, this notion of high school being kind of a pipeline to industry. If you can't tell, I could go on and on with very little breathing. I tell my kids, you know, space to breathe between what I say. I tell my students that, you know, if I speak 1 million words a year, then my principal gives me a bonus. And they're like, "How really? How do they measure how many words you speak?" But I will cut my time now and turn the floor over back to John.
Well, thank you very much. You know, as you're talking about who the customer is, I'm, you know, sort of splitting that. I'm thinking, okay, well, there is the customer, there's the consumer, and then there's the stakeholder. And you know, I'm not sure all three are the same. I'd say probably really your customer is those gosh darn parents. I think probably the consumer is industry, and I think the stakeholder is society and community. You know, but we could talk about that some other time. But
Sure.
you know, what I'd like to do now is offer the panelists and Amy Eskelson, our keynote speaker, to sort of interact with each other about, you know, elaborating on points already made, a question that might have been raised. You folks are colleagues and professionals, and sort of in witness in the, you know, the audience sort of gaining the benefit of your interactions with each other. If for no other reason, it's been a long time since you folks have had a chance to see each other. You know, Alexis knows Paul Malone and Paul Conroe, and Amy knows Paul, and, you know, Brian is learning who everybody is. So if there's something that you folks would sort of like to pick up on as a point relevant to this symposium that has not yet been made and seek the elaboration from your colleagues, please feel free to do that right now.
Well, I will say that one of the tidbits that I learned when I was thinking about doing this talk that really I thought was interesting and funny was that Isaac Newton worked from home in a pandemic.
Right. You know,
or maybe an epidemic. It was an epidemic.
Yeah.
Not entirely relevant, but yet really so relevant, right?
Right. Yeah. How it has affected absolutely everything.
Ironic.
Yep.
I just wanted to follow up on something, John, that you mentioned a few moments ago when you mentioned the audiences and the stakeholders. I think it's important for us to think about exactly who we need to target. And this is, of course, very familiar with, I'm sure, your organization as a whole, regardless of background. Brian spoke to the importance of the high school partnerships and engaging the students. And then, John, you mentioned the parents. And I think that the parent component is really important, particularly when we're thinking about introducing people to a field that perhaps they've never even heard of. I think we have a challenge within our field that Amy and I both have to start our talks by talking about what optics is. Like, those of us in the field love it and know it, but I think to many who don't, they hear optics and think where Paul Conroe's career began with glasses. And so there's an education component that's important to this industry that goes to the parents, to the students themselves, to the guidance counselors. But we have opportunities also to career changers, people who are able to, leave being a barista at Starbucks and instead come to be part of this optics industry. And those are all of the people in which we need to reach out to grow this workforce and to really touch on that more.
Right. Yep. And not all of these audiences are the same, right? How we speak to one audience is different than how we speak to a different audience. And yet the purpose needs to have that continuity of what we're trying to accomplish. So yeah, absolutely. Are there folks in the audience here in attendance? We've got, Naveed is not a panelist, but he has been essential in the creation of this program. Josanne Donatali is here from Americom. I think Alexis, either you stole from her or she stole from you. It was communicated to me at the Hampton Diner. The importance of knowing what the skills and dispositions are in folks who end up in optics, folks who can work with their hands. They might have fine motor coordination in their hands, but also athletes have a disposition for practice makes perfect, perseverance, even if it's not easy, to get things right, drilling and whatnot. So the creativity and the artistry. So these things, I think all fit together. And so, Josanne, you may have something that you want to say in observation to this. Naveed, you may have something that you wish to say in observation of today's symposium.
Well, thank you for that. And first thing I need to say is everything I know I learned from Alexis. So she didn't learn one thing from me ever. But I'm the national marketing manager for Americom, and my job is to get the word out. We're both helping the community colleges. We're establishing hubs, ecosystems around the country. There'll be 6 of them as tier 1 ecosystems. Sussex Community College is the first one on board after using the MCC model. And so part of my job is to help recruit students to each of the community college partners we have. And I'll do that through a very targeted marketing campaign based in large part on the backgrounds and lifestyles and hobbies and interests of our target audience. So knowing that there is gamers and athletes and auto mechanics and crafters and parents who really love to send their kids to STEM camps. Those are all of the things we need as we build out our campaign. So it will help us recruit students, but we're also going to layer a just what the heck is optics anyway component to it. So it'll raise awareness about the field of optics similar in ways to how the robotics industry has taken off with the competitions as early as middle school. So we have ambitious goals to do that for the optics industry as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And maybe we don't have to add much to this call. Everyone else has pretty much covered it. So I want to thank everybody for their service, especially the people on the academia side. You guys are really going above and beyond to serve this need that our nation has. I just want us to keep thinking about how do we communicate that need and that opportunity to kids in high school. I had an opportunity to speak to a science class at Opacon last week, and great kids, a great class, but I'm not sure how many students are going to come out of it. So there's something for us to keep in mind.
Right. Well, great, Naveed. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody. Thank you, Matt Rowe, for facilitating this so ably with the technology. Thank you, Jamie. You didn't have a place on the stage, but we would be nowhere at Susquehanna Community College without the work that you do, much less in Sussex County in general. You're the liaison and connection point between Thor Labs and so much of what happens here in Sussex County. And Sandra, Madam Executive Director for ATEA. My job here is done, and I leave it to you.
I do want to add thank you, John. I do want to add two comments really from an ATEA perspective, because we work across sectors and across the country and are in 46 states. And Amy, thank you so much for drawing attention to our theme this year, the Renaissance of Technical Ed. Something that's not widely understood about people that really come through the technical route, and Paul Malone is the entrepreneurship. And we actually featured entrepreneurs at a national conference in actually 2014 that came out of Dunwoody College, where this ATEA is housed. And the president there, he had at that time 25 alums who were in the 100 million, or well, I don't know if they're all $100 million businesses. He had a hard time coming up with to pick 4. And people coming out of technical ed, they hire each other. So Paul, you are a great example of that. And then the other thing that ATEA has learned, we did a conference in Reno at the Gigafactory when it first went into Reno, and there was not a workforce, and Truckee Meadow did not have the faculty to teach what was needed. And they hired 2 adjuncts from the naval base. That's the Top Gun naval base to teach. And then when they had graduates, they hired them to teach in the program for, for working at the Gigafactory. And they also lowered a threshold so you could get the casino worker to be able to work in there. So some of the same themes are happening around the country. I just wanted to point that out. But I want to thank Dr. Conley so much for heading this up, and all of you for really what's a great content and understanding of optics and photonics. And we will have this as a video on the YouTube, our YouTube channel. And certainly we'll keep this in mind for a thread going through, as we did this year with artificial intelligence and last year with cybersecurity. We could certainly do a thread with this particular expertise through the industries that we have as our sectors. So again, thank you, Dr. Conley. I want to thank Wendy Fulham, who is there somewhere, and want to connect with those of you. We've had a couple of chat exchanges, and Matt Rowe, he is our expert out of Port Arthur. And again, thank you so much.